好的，欢迎今天大家又回来，希望今天能够带给大家像昨天一样的一些收获，或者是惊喜。那我们就现在先开始进入第一个环节，那我们就请到我的双胞胎兄弟唐爱益我们一起来做一个对谈。我想大家的简介里可能有人看到，这个唐爱益他的家族是大概100多年来都在美国的500强企业，可能200强吧，是世界上最大的印刷厂，大概有6万到8万的员工，是一个相当具规模的公司。他自己本身呢，主要是在管理他们第5代的一个投资基金，但他人生的心愿完全是不眠不休的在投入做公益，各式各样帮助人类的事情。我对唐爱益，我自己内心最佩服的一点，是我很少见过这么一种人，叫做可高可低。什么叫做可高可低呢？他为了做一些事情或商业谈判，他可以去住总统套房，他去跳舞，跟很多朋友在一起，他可以连跳1个星期的舞，跟20个人挤在这样一个角落，这么一个房间里，他也可以。他的朋友里面，上至总统，下至街头的流浪汉，街头的舞者，他跟所有的人在一起，他完全平等。我跟他在一起这么6、7年里面，从来没有见过他好像对一个在上面的人的巴结，或者对任何一个在下的人的看不起，他完全没有这个感觉。那后来我就问他，他是怎么会变成这个样的？所以我想，我们从这一点，我们可以开始谈谈看。You can get my question? So I would like to hear a bit of how your parents educated you and how they brought you up the way they did.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I think at first I would just like to thank you, Mark, and Yangjing, and all the people here who've made this event possible. Thank you all for putting on a spectacular event. So I'd like everybody to give a round of applause to Mark and Yangjing and everybody else who's made this happen. It is really special, and I know as I was coming over this morning with Larry from the China World, and he had the opportunity to go meet President Chen of Tsinghua University, and he said, I woke up this morning and the most important thing was to come back to this conference and be here today. So I think that's a testament really to the amazing job that you've done.
Thank you.
Yeah, so to talk a little bit about myself, I mean, I feel incredibly blessed to be in this room with so many amazing people. I feel like I've had, again, this chance to get to know people last night and over the past day, and certainly know you and Yangjing, and have tremendous gratitude and respect for you and gratitude that you're in my life. I think, you know, what I can share a little bit, I'll slow down. What I can share about my own life and sort of how I've come to be the person that I've become is really, I credit that to my mother and my father, as well as my grandparents. I think a very important decision, and I've shared this with some of you last night, that my mother and father made was right after I was born. They decided to stay in California. And that was really came about when my father, he fought in Vietnam. My mother had been working for the Peace Corps. And while my father was fighting in Vietnam, she lived in Chicago with my father's family. And my father's family is an amazing family with this incredibly rich tradition of civic philanthropy, of top business in Chicago. But the community that my father had grown up in when he was a boy, which had very strong values, had started to change. I think the values of basically humility, hard work, and basically non-differentiation between the rich and the poor people in that community, or the mixed social status, started to change. And so there was more and more of an emphasis on your status, on who had the big house, who drove the fast car, rather than who you were as a person. And I think my mother was very disturbed by this. And when my father came back from Vietnam and was trying to decide, when he was going back to Chicago to work in the family company, she shared her concerns with him. And to his credit, he decided to forego a very easy career for him, a career that could have made him the CEO of a top Fortune 500 company. And instead, he made the choice to forgo that in favor of his children. And he decided to not go back to the family business, much to the disappointment of his mother and father and his brothers. And he did that really for us. And he made the choice to start off as a school teacher in high school. And then he came to Berkeley, California in 1969. And he started a very interesting school about how to try new models in education. And I pretty much grew up in Berkeley, California, with a father who was living a very humble life, and my mother who was devoted to service. I think we grew up in Thanksgiving, going to homeless shelters, and we would serve food to the homeless people. And my peer group, rather than the sons and daughters of the biggest businessmen in Chicago, were the sons and daughters of Cal Berkeley professors. And my mother also, through her social work, was also very committed to educating us to, be very humble and always to help people. And my father also lived that life. So I feel like, I grew up in this wonderful environment and had a very strong introduction to service and giving back. And I also feel that my father did a lot to shield us from some of the, I think, harmful influences of being from a big family. Being from a big family can be a very fantastic thing, but if not put in the right context, it can actually be destructive for young children. And in fact, he shielded me so much that I didn't realize that when I was 13, I remember receiving a book called the Guinness Book of World Records. And I remember reading through the pages, and I came to this point about printing companies, and I saw this company that had the same last name as mine with the same spelling. It was Donnelley. I was like, oh my God, this is so funny. That name is the exact same spelling as my last name. And so I went to my father, and I showed my father. I said, look, this is the funniest thing. There's this big company out there, and it has the same spelling as our last name. Isn't that strange? And in the end, he sat down and told me that at that time the history of the family. But up until that time, 13 years old, I had no idea really about that. And that to me was in fact a gift, because I think my cousins being in Chicago, everybody knew them as this family. People treated them sometimes differently. But I think the gift was I realized at that point that I was really from a multi-generation family, but the gift my mother and father gave me, aside from very strong values, and how to give back, was that of the feeling of being first generation. So I think that has a lot to do with it. Certainly my grandmother and grandfather, I knew 3 of my 4 grandparents very well. They had a profound influence on who I was, and certainly the incredible community of people that were around me.
I remember before you also said about during when you're growing up, that is, your parents have all kinds of different people that comes to your house all the time. You say
Yeah, so I think being in Berkeley, California in 1969 and 70s, you had people from, radical sort of political philosophers, around the dinner table. We had people who were, my mother was working in new forms of mental health, trying to work in new models on how to deal with people who were sick and trying to understand what it meant to have mental illness. Because I think in the past in the United States, people would separate people as mentally ill as other. I think she actually studied a lot of Carl Jung, the collective unconsciousness, was very influenced by dreams and symbols and images, and I think really was trying to find a new way of working with people who were, classically termed schizophrenic. And so some of those people I came to know, as well, and also there were also people in the Black Panther movement. One of the teachers was a person who was part of the San Quentin Six, who I visited in Vacaville prison and wrote a high school paper on his story, which was amazing. His name was Johnny Spain. I also had the opportunity to meet some of the business people and leaders in the area. Also, our relatives from Chicago would come through. So it was very, very diverse group from very, very high academics. That my childhood friend was the head of the computer science department at Cal Berkeley, which was sort of at the cutting edge of science and technology at that time. So I had an incredible gift of many different influences that were in my life all the time. So I felt like I had all of these teachers, aside from my family, that were there to help me to develop a perspective on who I was. It wasn't just relegated to one segment.
我一直觉得这是 Elliott 非常特别的一点。 我自己其实是在一个比较受保护的一个大家庭里长大的，一个大的院子，有不晓得多少服侍的人员，从司机、警卫各个方面。但是我看到他的父亲带他也是一个非常特别的方法，真的是让他接触到社会里面各个阶层不同的人物。我觉得这个对他养成平等心也是有非常大的帮助。And there's another story that you told us that really moved us. Yangjing and I often would talk about is how your father taught you to be satisfied and play games with, to be homeless or picking up cardboard.
Yeah, well, it wasn't about picking up cardboard, but I think it was a sort of a philosophy about who my father is and was. I mean, just to give you a little more context, after my father started this experimental school, he decided to start a series of, I think he was in some ways an impact investor. He started a series of businesses that he felt very passionately about would have a very positive impact on the planet. And he did that for a number of years. And then I think one day when he was 60 or 65, he woke up and said, in fact, my passion is education. He sold all of the businesses. And he went back to school to get a teaching credential and a master's. And he went to become a public high school teacher in Sonoma. And he's now a public high school teacher. And I see a lot of people in the world, and I think there are two types of power in the world. Like it's called the big P and the small p. And I think the small power is the people that we think of traditionally as the people, maybe Bill Gates or Warren Buffett or President Clinton or Tony Blair. These are people that are considerably people think of as the big P. It's what people strive for. But I think really that is the small p. The big P is the internal power. It's the power of passion. It's the power of commitment. It's the power of love. And I see that in people like my father. I see that in people like Chester Whitmore, who's an amazing dancer that most people would see an African-American man and think he's a homeless person. I see it in some of the incredible people that I see in this room as well, right? So I think that that's something that my father, by virtue of his choices in his life, he showed me, I think, and my mother, what the meaning of true power is, right? His commitment has been to his students. And if you go to Sonoma, you feel like you're with, I don't know, Brad Pitt or something. Everybody just goes crazy when they see my father. And he does things and he says nothing, right? He helps put people through school without anybody knowing. He gets up at 6. Every morning he gets up at 3 in the morning to prepare his plans and to work with his students. He has at 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. he has his students come and he will train any of them, anyone who's failing. He said, I'll make a deal. You come and meet me at 6 a.m. and we'll help you pass the course. And he works with people who are immigrants and everything else. So I think that that's just by virtue of those things. But I think the other thing that he had was a sense that he gave us no matter what. A lot of people always think about a culture of, dearth. That means I feel like I need to have more. I'm never satisfied. I need more material wealth. I need more things in my life. The thing my father gave me was a perspective on that. He basically gave us the chance that if we were homeless and all we had was a cardboard box living on the street, he would come to my brother and I with this sort of an attitude. He would say, isn't this the most amazing box you've ever seen? Isn't this the most incredible thing? This is going to be incredible. We'll be able to do so much with this box. Life is so great. It's amazing, right? So he has this incredible ability, and no matter what situation, no matter how bad it looks, to always look at the world as it's so filled with possibility. So I think just that attitude in itself, because I think so much of the sickness that we see in the world and the problems we see is around a mental state that we have. And that's a mental state governed by fear. It's governed by, a sense that I'm not enough and I need more. I need to get more material wealth and more power. But I think if we can change consciousness to focus on the infinite amount of possibilities that are in front of us at every moment, to create, to love, to connect, the world would be an amazing place. And I feel like that is one of the greatest lessons that I've learned from my father and has shaped me.
Thank you very much. And you once told me one of the transformational experience that you had was dancing. Actually, one of the guests here today, who's an artist, also very tall, probably 6'1", 6'2", said, "How could he dance? He is so tall." Said maybe one day I should learn from him. So you can share with us a little bit about how dancing has transformed you, and how that started.
Yeah, so I think in addition to my father and mother, which are very profound influences, thank you. I also had the influence of the family in Chicago, which is a respected family with very strong values. And you have certain messages within Chicago top business community. If you're going to be a Donnelley, you must go to a good school. You must go into business. You must do sports that are, basically respected. You can kill animals. You can climb mountains. But the idea that a man in that milieu would dance is an embarrassment, right? If you're a man, you're supposed to be, going out and killing things and, climbing mountains and all the rest of it. But if you dance, it's almost a shame. Right. So I think, so that gives you some context. So what happened for me is in 1997, I had left a very difficult relationship. And it was a very tough time for me psychically and emotionally. And I made the decision to go back to rowing. I was a rower in college. I had never rowed before. I came to Yale University. A friend suggested I go to the rowing team, and I did. It was very hard for me to row, but I actually did okay. And 2 years after I took my first stroke, I had won a seat in the national team to represent the United States in the World Championships. And so that was a gift that I had. I was quite good at it. But unfortunately I was injured, was not able to do it, and went on to other things. I started taking Chinese, which led me to China. So one door closed, another door opened. 10 years later, as I was leaving this relationship, my brother, who was also a rower, convinced me to go with him to train to row at the Henley Royal Regatta, which is basically the equivalent of the Wimbledon for rowing. And I trained for a year, and I lived with my brother in San Francisco. And it was a wonderful time, because after a very difficult emotional period in my life, I was able to start to connect again with my body and with things that I loved, and sports and athletics. And I think it was during that period where I was starting to open up again that I remember in San Francisco committing to trying new things in my life. And I drove by a dance studio in San Francisco, and something hit me as I drove by. Like, never before would I ever think about dancing. Why would I ever think about that? But I drove by this dance studio, and something told me to stop. And I stopped and I walked in and I said, "Tell me about dancing." And they told me a bunch of different things, and I then went back to my brother and I said, I was going to suggest this to him thinking he would say that I was crazy. I said, "I think we should learn to dance. And dance with a woman. Dance with a partner. We can all jump around, but how do you actually really dance with a partner?" And that was something I was always so bad at and was so terrified to do. Anytime there was a wedding and a woman came up to me, I would try to run away, right, and hide, because it was scary. And so my brother looked at me and, to his credit, said, "I think we should do it, and I think we should try tango." He had just been in Argentina. His best friend had been married to an Argentine woman. So we walked into the class the first day, and here I am, 6'4", 6'5". And the first exercise the teacher had us do, her name was Brenda Figuero. She was a beautiful Argentine woman, very voluptuous, big lips, big eyes, beautiful. And I said, "Oh, this couldn't be all bad." And so I walked in, and I thought it couldn't be all bad until I heard what we had to do, which was we had to walk to the beat of the music. And I couldn't hear the beat. I couldn't hear the 1, I couldn't hear the 3, I couldn't hear the 8, and I couldn't walk to the music. So something that's very simple, I was incredibly challenged with. And I remember barely making it through the class. And I remember she gave us a homework assignment where we had to memorize this little pattern. And for the entire week, every day I would wake up in the morning at the bathroom and I would try to review the pattern. And then at night I would review it. At lunch I would review it. I would check to my brother. I said, "Is this the pattern? Is this the right way to do it?" And he would say, "I think it is." And I remember finally coming to the point where I was comfortable, where I could almost do the pattern. And then we had the next class. And Brenda walked in, and she looked at the class, and she put on the music, and she came to me. She grabbed me by the back of my neck, drew me into her ample chest, and said, "Lead me." And at that moment, I forgot everything. I was totally blank, and I panicked. I turned bright red. I started sweating. I looked very nervously to my brother for help. My brother wasn't giving me any help. And so I sort of stumbled her into the corner and mumbled something to her. offbeat. And then she said, thank you. And I sort of looked to my brother and said, I think I'm done. And my brother, who's very cheap, he had paid $70 for the lesson. He said, we're going to get our money's worth. So you can't quit. And so I was very, very thankful that my brother made me do that, because I managed to continue on, and I was really the worst dancer ever, really. I had 2 left feet. I couldn't hear the one. But somehow I stuck with it, and eventually she left to Germany with her blonde, long-haired tango boyfriend and let us alone. And so we had some extra credit on our dance card, and we started taking a swing dancing class. And so we took something called the Lindy Hop. The Lindy Hop is the hip hop of the 1930s and 40s. It was a dance that was born in Harlem in 1928, and it was danced in the Savoy ballrooms and the ballrooms in Harlem to big band jazz music, which was, again, the hip hop music of its day. And I had not heard of this dance. I think I had seen things called jitterbug or swing dancing, but this was the root of this dance. And this was being taught. And so my brother and I took one class. And we were very connected to the energy, because it was a happy dance. It had a lot of energy. There was a lot of joy. There was a lot of love. And I couldn't do any of it, but I was just really excited by it. And I remember we went to go rowing in Europe, and someone told us we should go to Sweden. And so we said, fine. So we finished rowing at Henley. We ended up going to Sweden, buying a ticket to Arlanda airport, and we followed the directions on this map to this little community center in this village on the Baltic Sea. And I remember walking in to this dance festival where people had come from all over the world, every country, to dance this dance. And as I walked in, I heard this laugh. I heard this music, and I heard a laugh. And the laugh stopped me, because it embodied to me joy, love, all these things. It was like a voice from another world. And that laugh was the laugh of a 79-year-old African-American man who was one of the best dancers who has ever lived. His name was Frankie Manning. And that was my first introduction. And it started me, that moment forward, started me down a totally unexpected path to doing something that I was very bad at, but connected with me at a heart level. And I stuck with that dance. And even though today I'm still not very good, it has transformed the way that I see the world and how I see people, because I see how it brings people together, how it connects people in a feeling of joy and a feeling of almost meditation. And I've seen in my experience in this dance and in this world, I can see the only thing I can call it is magic. I've seen magic happen, and I've seen it happen over and over and over again. And it sees when you connect people and you get them moving together to music, and with a partner, something happens that transcends you, the person, or that moment. It's truly transcendent. And I think that's probably the highest form of sort of meditative experience that I probably have experienced in my life.
Thank you so much.